Great. Okay, that should work.
Great. So thanks everyone for joining. We are meeting today with Leary, our guest speaker for the Think Global Act Local programme with my module, the Attitudes and Languages around Marginalised Groups. Don was kind enough to agree to speak with us and going to speak on the issue of marginalisation of young people in Ireland and how young people are treated, especially with a view to education, which is where Don's background is in. So we'll drive on. Don, could you tell us, first of all, your own background and then what the Life Centre is and what the Cork Life Centre does?
Yeah, first of all, apologies for not making the weekly tonight. Unfortunately, I had the Minister of Education there for all the good it did. My own background, I suppose, really is I started out in a beautiful community. Our politics maybe is a starting point. I was an ex-councillor pushing Fiann here, and I spent a couple of years in holiday in Portlaoise. But I have worked with kids for the majority of my life, in the voluntary capacity or in the paid capacity. And directly before I came to the Life Centre, I was working with the Youth Encounter project as a youth worker, working in the afternoons, but also ended up teaching the junior class there. And so when this position came up with the Life Centre, I was unsure whether I would take it because I was happy where I was. But I did, and I went to the interview, got the job, and took it. Now, when I came here, the Life Centre is I suppose, trustees and founders in Ireland anyway, are the Christian Brothers. And our trustees are the European province of the Christian Brothers, and have been and continue to be. The house we're in is the former Christian Brothers Monastery for Blair Street Boys School. When I came here, the Life Centres, I suppose, originally they came from Trinidad and Tobago, and two Irish religious people, Brother Paul Hendrick and Sister Mary Flood, who both worked in the inner city of Dublin, had been out there at different times and had worked in the Life Centres. And the Life Centre is a model, and it's basically SERVI, which is an acronym for Service Volunteers for All. And it came about quite easily by an Irish American priest who got called Jerry Panton, who was working through that. And there were riots in I suppose the shanty towns, ghettos maybe even, by young people. And they went on for a while, and people died, and young people died. And he'd been trying to get him to speak to see what was going on. And basically, when he got in there, what the young people were telling him was that they had no jobs, they had no education, and they had no hope. And so the conversation went on for a while, and when he was leaving, he said, "Okay, I'm leaving, but if there's one thing I could do for you, what is it?" I suppose, understanding that they were young people, what they asked him for was a basketball court. And he says, "How about I get you to make things as a basketball court and you build it yourselves?" And he did. And from that small little idea, they saw what model was going. Because what they then did was they looked at where would they find work. Mopeds for the metal transport around the island. So some of them did work around that and got a bit of education around bit more mechanic. Others did landscaping, others did some farming. And it just mushroomed. I mean, there were problems in between because they had to go back and learn about keeping books and paying taxes and all of that. And initially what they did was they invited the young people to come up with their own ideas, and the young people were given the tools to start the business. Now, they weren't given the tools, and so keep them. The tools were bought, and it was a rent to buy. So they when they did a job, some money aside, paid for the tools, and that allowed the organisation to buy more tools from more people. And it's spread right over the Caribbean. There's some in Central America, some in South America. I'm talking to some of the people in Trinidad. I know for the last number, and it's a process. For the last number of years, of trying to get recognized as a UNESCO education model, a world model, and that's still in progress. So here, when Paul and Sister Mary came back, they met up. Our function actually, they were due to be one another, and they decided to look and see could anything be done in Ireland, particularly young people who were out of education. Now, the inner city at the time was fairly desolate. I mean, it's all the docks. It's never the broadcast theatre as long as where the house ended. When they did a bit of research from the kids out of education, what they did, they opened in one room inside Western Row, the house with birds in Western Row, and they ended up working with 6 kids in that house for a number of years. And then they moved to a house in Fair Square. Now, all they ever took was 89 young people, and was just juniors. Well, actually, the young people started coming from everywhere. They were from Cherry Orchard, Clondalk, and all of that direction, and from both sides of the inner city. As the Cork Centre was opened in 2000, again by Christian Bogle, by Gary O'Shea, who himself had been to Trinidad and had seen the model in operation. And he came back. The house here was derelict. The first time they were out before the cabin out there, and they met with a couple of kids. There was a third one opened in Belfast on the Peace Line, and it took young people from both sides of the divide. Bit older age group, they would have been kind of leaving cert here, and they had about 15 young people at maximum. That was closed. I think the first one was the last eventually was Cherry Orchard, which was a house on the Cherry Orchard estate, again with 6 young people, and it was a 2-bedroom house with bits and pieces on it. Again, you know, there was a bird's house in Cherry Orchard, the residents out there, and they provide kind of services other than that before the Life Centre opened. So the Life Centres then went on for a while, and there was no funding. Then there was something. The centre here got 20,000 from the health department when they opened. We had Martin in the Minister for Health at the time, and he gave it back. But when there was nobody coming in, I suppose, when I came here, the majority of my money was coming from the Christian Brothers, very little coming from the state. Actually, from the state. And so we were working on a budget of about 165,000. The majority, 145,000 coming from the brothers. And then the department came on board and gave here 45,000. They gave, 50,000 they gave here, and 960 corporation hours. Corporation hours in part-time hours for teachers, probably then 1 person and a half of the year. That's how much we pay for. So that maintained when it started. But then when I started here, one of the tasks I was given was to try and build it, and to try and build the service. So we started growing very quickly. By the end of my first year here, we had 12 students. Still doing junior cert. The following year, we probably had 14, 15 students. And we had a problem. A young lad who couldn't get back into education. Someone who hadn't been in trouble. His brother was nearly killed when he was in school. Playroad accident, goalpost on his head, his brother's head. Nearly died, but it had brain acquired syndrome. And the family were actually called to hospital saying he was dying. The 2 other brothers, the 2 others were shifted over the smaller school they were in. And they were put into a fairly large city school with over 800 students in it. And the youngest guy, the guy that came here, was starting to get angry. He couldn't understand why he had to be removed from his friends. And so he wasn't doing putting any work, and they were going to expel him. He was brought to us here and he joined us. For his junior cert, he did 13 subjects. He picked up 1 subject here, which was woodwork, and the other subject was science. Schools never passed on his work, so I kind of said to him, don't do the science or I'm finished. But he wanted to do it. They're higher level than anything else that he could, bear in mind his common papers. But we couldn't get him back into the rooms. We searched every school on the north side of the city centre, towards where he lived. We DW was working, and in the end, I kind of forced him into a school, first school to take it. And I had to offer that if he got into trouble, to let him drive up, collect the child, and take him over there. They'd have no problem. The child was pushed out after 3 months. But it was definitely down to teachers in the staff room, didn't ask the child why he was out of education, and assumed that the child was so. And then, like, if you're not right, if you're not wanted, you pick that up very quickly. So the child. There's a good ending to this story. The child is in the job. He went to do furniture making, with the woodworking here. He actually excels in it. He was, I suppose, handpicked by an organisation, still, to go and do an apprentice. There was no one in the country they've been known for about 10 years previous apprenticeship to Cooper making barrels for whiskey. He's travelled the world. He's fully qualified, and he works in St. December. But like the life centres, I suppose, here were for young people that were reforming education. And there's lots of reasons why young people are reforming education. I think everybody that thinks that a young person's out of school thinks that they're trouble. That's not the case. For, at different times here, we've had young people with autism. We have young people who would be have addiction. We have young people who have youth trauma. We have young people in care, young people in the juvenile justice system, and young people that just weren't able to work in the straitjacket that is in this country, secondary school education. We, after that young lad had got the junior cert, we had little success getting in. We started a leaving cert in 2009. We have struggled since I've been here to get proper funding. Now, initially, we got over that problem by looking for volunteers. And I think for me, having volunteers, it has become part of the uses of the Lynch Centre. I mean, I talked about servile. There are three, if you like, prongs to servile. One is that philosophy of ignorance. In other words, I know nothing about any young person when they come to the door here. And I have to spend time finding that out at the child's pace. So I'm not going to ring the school that is come out, especially to be next band. And I'm not going to pry. But the children, as we build a relationship, and some all different times, it could take just a couple of weeks for some kids to start opening up to you, but it could be years. But it's to allow that to happen and to allow that. So that's the velocity. Attentive listening is the next one. Now, adults are brilliant at hearing the noise. Can hear the noise of kids, that old saying, children should be seen and not heard. I think it's very prevalent. But young people are brilliant at leaving to know what's going on for them if we listen. And if we don't jump in and try and tell them what's wrong with them. And they'll tell us themselves. And the last one is respectful intervention. Lots of things about that. I mean, there's nobody in this centre can fix anybody. We can support young people. Sometimes, you could be, the young person isn't willing. Like a lot of young people that come here will be, they have two things that they might have in common. One thing they all have in common is self-confidence, self-esteem, is at rock bottom. That can be easily sorted. You can do that by telling the kid they've done well. You can, once you say something positive to a child, it starts building that up. It takes them a while because if children never heard anything positive about themselves from the school, from the community, maybe even at home, they don't know how to accept that. So that has to be done really well, and the kids have to understand when you're saying it. But it then starts developing, and they can build that up. I think the other way to look at that is, sometimes you meet a parent as well. But the parents are your fault. I don't believe that. But the one thing I can say about every parent I've ever met inside here is they love the child. They love their children. No. Someone said, but they don't parent properly, and I said, sound. But what's parenting properly? I mean, most of us will learn how to parent from our own parents, from the community, from other family members. What happens if you don't have that? So, parenting is not something you're given a name. You have to develop that along. And if you haven't got that background behind you, then it can be difficult and people can struggle. Doesn't mean to say they're bad parents. And the one thing I know is that if you meet a child and you start giving out to the parent in front of the child, I guarantee you one thing, the child will not work with you. So you have to have a level of respect for everybody that comes with the child. It'll be dad, be mom, or your sibling, whatever it is, you respect them. If you don't, you're not working with the child. You can learn that the hard way. And I suppose that, like, if you show me a child that's been removed from a school, for instance, I'll show you a parent that has been tormented and given out to for 5-6 years in schools. Because what tends to happen, your son is 6'5", your mother 4 foot nothing, they go into a principal's office because 6'5" is after doing something wrong with the way. Who does the principal go to? Go to the parent. The young person is sitting here, and then he said, "It's my fault, maybe not my mother." And so, you know, we need to kind of establish that straight away. It's one of the reasons I won't take young people from probation. The symbol of the life centre is the red doors, and the red doors are open, but they open both ways. Someone comes in here, they have to want to be here. You're not forcing them, they can leave whenever they like. And that's important because the young person has to take responsibility for what they're doing in here. You know, and when I meet a young person and the parent for the first time, I normally just talk to the young person for the first half of the meeting. Parents are taken aback by that, and the young person is. And I'll say to the young person, who have I been talking to me? Why? Sometimes they want honours and say, because I'm coming. I said, that's it. I said, if there's a problem in here, then we have to deal with it, not the others. We deal with it together. And it's kind of, you know, for me in here, it is about, because, you know, young people, like we give kids labels. So if they come out of school, they're already school leavers. Now think about that. That is to say that the young person has failed the system. That can't happen. It's the system fails the young person. But if you think about it, it's protecting the system by saying, well, not what grand, but the others go. And if you look at it this way, when we talk about culture in this country, yeah, I think some people might recognize that travel is a different culture to settle people. The Ukrainians here are coming in at the moment, they might have a different culture than Ireland to have. But actually, every family has a different culture. In some way, might be very much the same, but in different ways. Now, a school has a culture. So when the young person comes to the school, it's bringing its own culture. The school has their culture. Which culture should give sway? It's going to be the child's. It's going to be the family. It's going to be the child's. Now, we can't accommodate, I'm not blaming teachers, I'm not blaming schools. We cannot accommodate the needs of all of our young people in the present education system. That's a fact. There's no denying that. So like when the way young people are talked about, they're not their own agents. You know, they're seen as being a hindrance. So even during COVID, they were described as vectors. They were barred out of shops. They couldn't go to school, but they were blamed for being out with their friends. An awful lot of blame is placed on kids. If you look around any city or any town, in anywhere in the world, I would imagine, show me a public space where children are welcome. For the most part, or not. If 20 adults go down St. Paul Street and they stand and they talk and they're in a big group, and even if they're laughing and a bit boisterous, will the guards ever be called? Not a hope. With 20 kids on St. Paul Street, and they say the first thing you'll have will be the security coming out, telling them to move on. Then the guards will be called, and you can get some kids arrested. It's a public space. Children are part of the public. They have a right to be there in the same way we have a right to be anywhere else, but we don't recognize that. And another, like that transfers on. So that's the general consensus that children shouldn't be hanging around. We don't say adults hang around, but we do say children hang around. And children hanging around is problems that have to be dealt with. So you know, you have children in care, and if you think about this again, because there's loads of ways children are punished. So a child is taken into care for the child's protection. Explain to me why So many children that you find in Oversome are from care situations. Children in care homes, if they break a door by banging it, and if they break a window, the guards are caught. Imagine if every parent in the country, when their child bangs a door or breaks a window, starts calling the guards. We want to go 2 million Oversomes now just in Cork. I think there's a general idea that a child in care is trouble, which is unfortunate because it tends to then lead them into detention. And that can come in lots of ways. The child will always want to be home. So even they're taken into care units for their own safety, the child will still want to be at home. The child will always protect the family culture. We mightn't think it's great, but the child will protect that. And they'll always want to go back there. And any meeting I've ever attended with a child with other professionals in relation to the care placement, when the child is called in, the first question the child will invariably ask, I've met very few children that don't, I met one or two, but I met very few. And the first question is I want to go home. When can I go home? Now, the answer to that is always no. And the response to that nearly always is a storm. So the child is not there for their own. And it's more of a cop on. We do it here. We decide to do it here. And if a child is going to a care meeting, and after storming out the first one, I'll call them before the second one and say, look, what's going to happen when you go in here? What are you going to ask? Can I go home? What's the answer? No. What are you going to do? I'm going to leave. Okay, but you get nothing. And what you allow the professionals to say to a judge, he's not working with us, or she's not working with us. And the simple thing around that is to just ask for something else. So ask for an extra day at home, extra hours in the evening to be with your friends. So invariably they're going to say yes, because they've already said no. And I think if people only sat and explained that to children, it would lead to a lot of less problems in care homes. Unfortunately, the Irish government has not learned its lesson, and Tusker in particular has not learned the lesson. We now have a situation where most of the care homes provided, particularly in Cork City, are in private hands for profit. Imagine children who are in danger, people that are going to keep them safe, are doing it for profit. The one thing I know is the workers get very badly paid. There's profit, but the workers get very badly paid. Every child that goes into care is supposed to get a mentor with them, who's going to be the person that they will go to first, who they can talk to, who's going to watch over them. Usually important because that's the one that builds the relation. However, with the pay being so bad, most people don't last 2 months inside in these jobs, and they're gone. So it's like an opening. The kid can have, I've had kids who've had 4 in 2 months. I mean, how do you build a relationship like that? Who do you turn to? What do you put? It heightens the anxiety in young people. It also makes it, because the other thing I was going to say was, young people also have an issue around adults and trusting adults, because they don't see adults as someone they can trust. And what they always have is that someone they trusted has moved on. And that can have huge impacts, and it can have huge impacts. Why, if you were a child, would you bother trying to make an understanding even with an adult, when that adult, if you look at what's happened to you previously, is going to walk away? You don't. So we set kids up in that system to form and to fail. You know, if you look at results coming from Oversome, I was on the board of Oversome for it, and I totally believe this: children should not be detained. Children should not be in a jail situation. And what you call it, campus cut, it's still jail. And if you look at Oversome, it's cost you 350,000 to children. I went on to the board of Oversome because I believe that, okay, I don't want it there. But it is there, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, because we Irish have decided that punishment is the best form of safety. So the young people sent in there, I want to make sure that they're going to give a chance. And I'm going to say this now when people from the street. Still believe that we don't do kids justice and we don't keep children safe by sending them to detention. However, what was told us now set up gives the kids all they need. So they can get cams, they can get to addiction counselors, they get to a psychiatrist, they get education, they're off of drugs, they have a place to sleep, they're not hungry. The problem is, when you come to the situation where they're going back out, if they're in care, for instance, the care placement has been taken off of them the minute they enter the workshop, and it's not there when they come out. So what tends to happen is the children goes into the place where they said initially was unsafe. They go back amongst the drugs. None of the schools in the area will take them. There's no jobs. They're back out of education because the schools won't take them. And the spiral continues. So I think we need to look at why and what we're doing children. When you hear a discussion with you hear adults saying that children are vulnerable. There's no child vulnerable. We make them that way they are. They're not born vulnerable. We do that to them as society. There's no child born violent. We do that to them. Kids normally, kids have two, same as adults, have two reactions to if they're frightened. And it's either run or fight. Fight or flat. And a lot of kids fight. The kids that fight will end up in a care situation or somewhere else. But they're only doing to protect themselves because they know no better. And now, if you look at the juvenile justice system, I think it's a joke. If you're a businessman and you have a problem with a company, you go to a solicitor who's been trained in business law. You run to a court where the judge understands about business law and you're dealt with. If you do a criminal offence, you're brought in as an adult and you're able to face, you have a criminal lawyer who's supporting yours. A child comes along, judges are not trained in juvenile justice. The majority of solicitors and barristers are not trained in juvenile justice. And so what you tend to happen in children's courts is they're treated like many adults. When the Commission on the Rights of the Child clearly states in relation to all of this that young people, if they're brought before a court, the thing needs to happen quickly. Detention should be the last thing in it. You should not be rolling cases out. The quicker it's heard, the quicker. And that's easily understood. Children's brains don't work in the same way as adults. They're not that way. So a child that keeps going back into court every Friday because the solicitor wants to earn €189 and the judge hasn't set the thing down, starts to not understand why they're there. They cannot remember, why am I here in the first place? The other thing is that you're opening them up. Children's courts are held in camera. Yes, that's true. But they're all told to come into the courthouse at the one time. So I'm going to the district court any Friday morning, and you'll see 20, 30 youngsters, guards, media, parents, care homes, anybody kids in the room. It becomes a natural place to be. And children just do not remember. So even in here, if a child does something today, it is a waste of time me talking to that child about it to the extent. I talk about it now, or I forget about it. Because the child won't remember. If a child doesn't remember what are you doing, what lesson you want to give them, you need to do it immediately. But we don't do that. So we tend to treat children like many adults. They're not the children. We tend to think that rights are the adult's right to give. They're not. They're like human rights. They're children's rights, and they're theirs. We don't give it to them. They're theirs. They're there already. Ireland has signed up to them, but they're not on.
I have a few questions, John, just about how is our system here, and how's our model in Life Centre different to a regular mainstream school, and how do we support kids in different ways?
Well, it's a wraparound service. So, for instance, I'm not particularly interested in how a child does in examinations. The memory test. But what I am interested in is, can that child, after 3 years, must be to a junior cert, or after 5 years to a leaving cert, can they go out there and make themselves a happy life? Can they go out and face there and be able to operate within the greater world? And for me, that's the most important. So what we offer here is, we do offer the education because, and this is important because for most people who get out of school leavers, they believe the kids don't want to be in school. Not true. The kids want the junior cert and they want the leaving cert. That's what allows us to work with them. We provide the add-ons, so kids with trauma. And lots of the kids have huge trauma. Well, like, there's quite a few who would have that, adults would have as well. But the work, given an opportunity to walk through the trauma, so we have counsellors, therapists, and we have a drugs counsellor. And staff are here not to try and get kids 625 points. That's never the goal. The goal is to make sure that the child, whatever they decide they want to do, that we're supporting them to do that. I mean, I speak to staff here regularly, especially when staff coming in and say, you see a child coming in here in the morning, you see that they're off. Don't be putting the maths book in front of that child. And put yourself in that position, so into the maths book in front of you. You'll probably throw them. If the child is off, you give them an opportunity to sit. If they want to tell you, they'll tell you. But that's not a waste of class. That actually is probably the best class in the day. Because it's leaving the child regulate, and it's leaving the child move on. Now, it might come up again during the day, and that's sound. We can deal with that. But I think there's lots of ways here. So the child is experiencing difficulties, or something has happened at home. You give them the opportunity to talk it through. And you never know who's going to do that. So staff need to be aware that a child could see you as the person to go to. And you can be told, that's all, that's good that the child will pick who they trust. We also, it's one-to-one teaching, 2-to-1 maximum. When they come up to leaving cert, maybe 3 or 4 could be in the class sometimes. But we don't stop the children even from deciding their own subjects. So I think it's 27 subjects we offer the leaving cert and 17 the junior cert. And the child can pick them. I know they can't do this in schools, and some to numbers and something else, but there's a number of children doing art, woodwork, music, and home economics. I have no problem with that. That's what things I do. That's sound. But they can also do science, all the other subjects there as well. They'll pick what they want instead of saying, I have to take that. I want to do, but I have to take it. And I think that opens the door for the child. The other thing is, particularly down, I'll talk about downstairs, but that's what we keep our first year, second years, and third years. Kids are going to take time. There will be kids that are weak academically, there will be kids that will moderate through, and then there are kids that are very good academically. They can all be cared for because no one cares. There's no competition. There's no feeling inferior. And when he's doing better than me or she's doing better than me, you do it at your own pace. It doesn't matter. Once you're doing the best you can do, it doesn't matter. You're going to get to where you need to be. And I think that's a big thing, because kids, especially if they're coming out of school, believe they've failed. And you can understand that, because if leaving school isn't a one shot. There's a number of things that have happened to lead you to the day when you're coming out of school or removed from school. And that's a traumatic experience for kids, so they believe they failed in education. And it's about changing that, and they're seeing they can. I don't care where the child goes when they leave here, whether they go to work, go to PhD, go to college. The important thing is that they're going on. With kids with anxiety, and sometimes we have kids that come in here with mental health issues that they could have been in hospital for 2 years. We've had kids that come in here that haven't been in school for 3 years. And it's about getting them back into that. it would be a total and utter waste of time in my mind. Any of those children having 625 points, and they're going back into their bedroom. We fail in that sense. The leaving cert is going to do anything from there. So I'd much prefer that when we're bringing them in, that they do the best that they can do in the given time that they're here. You know, not everyone's going to get 600, and you don't have to get 625 points. It's a memory test. It's what do you need? Enjoy your time here. Give them the expectation that, you know, some people seem to have expectations of children. However, with us in here, I believe we have to have expectations, because very few people have, for those kids, any expectation. And a kid needs to know that there's someone looking to see that they're going to be okay. And we try to do that here. I think we do it. I think we have a mixture. As I said, volunteers are usually important. You know, there's, if you think about the messages, so kids have, they might have had great times with at home. They might not have great times in school. They might not, you know, the teachers, they might get on with them. However, you're not meeting a guy or a woman that's sitting across a desk from you, teaching you English, whatever it is. And they're there because they want to be there with you. They're not going to get paid in Friday, but they're there because of you. I mean, that's a massive thing to be sending to a child, especially children that feel like they don't belong and feel like they're not worth anything. It's always about work for kids, you know. No matter where they are, they want to be liked. They want to be amongst their peers. They don't want to feel inferior. I believe we don't do that here. There's very little bullying. I mean, we have kids that are bullied, and we have the kids that they bullied here, and that's a fact. We took in 2 kids who were expelled for bullying, and 4 months later, the 2 kids that they had bullied were in here as well. And the 2 kids that were bullied, none of the other 2 were here. While they were never great friends, I think at the end of the day, they would say hello to one another passing. I think, you know, you work here, I suppose, you volunteered there for a number of years. You wouldn't dream of saying anything about one kid to another kid. They're a community. They're very loyal to one another, and they're all different. And I think the great thing about kids is they see this as, you're here for your reasons, I'm here for my reasons. We're here. And they work. They may not have been, they may never have seen them as the best of friends outside, but in here, they're a community, and they'll tell you that. And I think that's what we can offer kids, you know, we can offer that kind of holistic view of things. Play down exams, they're the bane of the education system, because they're a memory test. We prepare them for nothing. Easy example, if you're preparing someone for English for leaving cert, we can hear Peter telling them, when you're doing an essay, write about yourself. You know yourself better than anyone else, so write about yourself. And so, yeah. You go down to UCC here, and you give them the first assignment, you put I in, I have a fair idea what the lecturer is going to say to you. What books did you write? So we're not even preparing them for that. You know, if you look at the number of kids that fall out again in third level, it's a first year, and it's a first year because they didn't know what to expect. With a kid who was getting 92% in all their exams through school, and they go down below getting 62. No one has told them they'll be marked out of 70, not 100. That's what they think they're failures. Kids suffer because nobody tells them about the bibliography. Simple thing. Why don't you tell a kid to look at the back of the course reader, and that's what you do with bibliography? Like, why are we playing games? You know, that's not going to decide whether a kid makes a good doctor or nurse or whatever they're doing. It's just rubbish. And it's just, it's very classist, and it can have very unfortunate effects on kids.
We have a few follow-up questions there from some of our participants as well. You mentioned there the classist elements within the education system. And one of the questions I asked is, how do we improve education for marginalised groups? So how do we make education more inclusive, both second and third level? Well, I think you have to start at primary level. You need to start removing this idea that there's a desk school and there's a non-desk school. Every school should get the elements that a desk school gets. Why? Because, I'm sorry, mental health hasn't learned how to distinguish between
whether you're middle class or working class. Anxiety is the same as that. And so, you know, we need to be open to kids. Kids need to come in relation to, you know, primary school. Kids are afraid of transitions. They get lost in transitions. And in primary school, you know, you have the one teacher for 3 years. And in this country, it's women teachers are found predominantly in the primary sector, and they're not found as principals and vice principals, but they're teaching. And it's very much a mammy and figure, right? And the kids get to know someone in 3 years. Taken from that system, you walk through the door of a secondary school and you have 8 teachers in one day. Where's that coming from? And you're not sure what's this about. So you now have to make sure 8 teachers like you. And kids are not able to manage that. I mean, it's an overload. We're not actually preparing them for that at all in any way. And then the kids come in and, according to the Department of Education, there's no streaming. Easy going to the Department of Education and working schools. And kids are split from one another. So your friend group is gone. You don't have to make new friends. If you're struggling mentally, even at that stage, where you come? If you have autism in that stage, you know, there's so many things that go on for kids. Where are you going with that? You might have domestic violence at home. You're not able to bring in your toy in the morning. You don't have black shoes. You're sent home. For somebody to buy black shoes from coming in 9 o'clock in the morning, you sending them home is going to give them black shoes at 1 o'clock. And I think we need to remember all that. I mean, it's for me, the classes have to be broken down anyway. They're too big. They're absolutely too big. I mean, all teachers in schools, and it's not the teachers' fault, all teachers in schools are judged on how many kids to get to exams and how to get through the exams. And so if you have a class of 30, I would suspect you have 5 kids that are acting out. In other words, they're climbing the wall, and may have a label of ADHD or one of the other behaviour. And then the kids are acting in. And they're fading into the wall. They're never going to ask to answer questions, they're never going to do anything, they're never going to make noise, just going to sit there and be terrified. That's what they do. So what the teacher has to do is, I have to try and mind them, but the other 20 are the ones that are going to get me seen as being a good teacher. That's unfair. That's their own judgment. The 20 will get to where they need to go. Certain of that. The 10 won't. So the first 5 to disappear with the fellows are run up and walk. The next 5 are the ones that commit suicide, end up in mental hospitals, dragged in and out of cams every week. And so they're gone. And so you're left with the 20. In actual fact, we should be trying to work with the 10. That's why we keep kids in school, if you do it that. Because we have kids with ADHD. Well, no, sorry. The kids have so many labels, and labels are never good for kids. And I don't care what label you put on. If you go to a school, well, here's Mary. Mary is brilliant at the book. She's absolutely brilliant. What they're saying is Mary's a nerd. She doesn't play for sports. Well, that's what you're being told. You go to Johnny then, and Johnny is probably standing holding the ball in his hand. Fabulous at the sports. Again, what you're being told is not academic, but he's brilliant at sports. And then you know, someone's like, he's just quiet. And you're gone on. None of those labels are good. Telling somebody a good sports person, it's what you're not saying in that is the big thing. And then they come, as they come forward, and you see the kids coming forward, they take that on. They take on the labels. So if you're saying someone's ADHD and someone else's OCD and ODD and you know whatever happened yourself, and you get some people for them, and you keep them mental health, and you keep them anorexia, and you keep that as drug addiction. What we tend to see then is the label. You cannot work with a label. It's impossible. What you should be doing is saying to a child, and I hope we do this here, I love you, you're brilliant. No, some of the behavior will have to sort. But we all have issues. We put them over there. You're brilliant, we're going to work on them. And that makes the child think they have a chance. I mean, it makes the child think that they're okay. They're not some specimen that you're going to introduced to people by saying whole lot, non-whole lot. It's rubbish, and you're taking away the personality of the child by doing that. And I think for me, that's something schools do, unfortunately. I don't think they mean to do that, but that's what they do. And that stays true for life. You know, that can kind of guide you for life.
How do you think we would better include groups like you've been a fantastic ally of the travelling community, or refugees, or how do we better include groups like that in education, that we see the highest level of early school leavers, for the lack of a better term?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a thing young people might even say it, but sometimes when you scratch us, we're racist. That's in particular with Irish travellers. Romani people, with refugees, no matter where they're coming from. I mean, if you take the Ukrainian situation, I think it's an eye-opener, and it should be an eye-opener for the country. So it took us 10 years to reach taking 3,000 Syrians. And I picked Syria up for a reason. The minute the war starts in the Ukraine, we brought stuff to the Ukraine, and I brought stuff to the Ukraine again. But the minute the war started, we had our Minister for Foreign Affairs coming out and saying, we're taking 120,000 Ukrainians. How many Syrians are we taking in? And it's rolling on for years. How many Somalians have we taken? How many Sudanese have we taken? How many Yemenis have we taken? How many Palestinians have we taken? How many Lebanese have we taken? And so you have to wonder what's the difference. And the only difference, and what I said to you, the guy that bombed the hospitals in Ukraine is the same guy that bombed the hospitals in Syria. The one that murdered people and buried them in mass graves in Syria is the same one that did it in Ukraine. Now, so what's the difference? Well, what's the difference? There's only one difference. The Ukrainians are white. And I think therein lies the problem. I think, we need to tackle racism in this country. We don't like hearing that because we're supposed to be the land of 1,000 migrants. We're not. I don't think we ever were, but we're definitely not now. And by doing things like that, we're actually playing into people that would want their country white and Irish. And no diversity. For the country that if everyone that claims to be Irish came back here, the island would sink. I mean, that's the reality. Don't be separating kids. Don't be separating travellers. Don't be separating. And it's not kids that do that. It's parents. Because parents tell the kid, "What travellers smelling? Oh, he's black. He's a Muslim. The Muslims did 9/11." When it's not that, it's and I'll go back a bit. The Romanians and the Eastern Europeans taking our jobs, my jobs, collecting up the rubbish bins. Those jobs are there because we didn't want to do them. The Irish didn't want to do them. We need to make our schools all inclusive. Don't be separating kids because, and we do it all the time. Look, Josephine Madigan has a great idea. She's going to put all the kids with autism into a hub. The new policy of the government for everything is a hub, because you put refugees into a hub. You put households that didn't know houses, but put them into a hub, it's great. So hub is the new answer. But if you think about it, in this country, we have a habit of separating kids. We say to kids with autism, you're not going to be managed, so we're going to give you special class. Separate them already. You're saying there's something wrong with a child with autism. Child with autism has different gifts. And that's not me saying something. We have lots of young people right across the spectrum. And they're brilliant. Are they all able to do the same? Are they all the same? No, they're not. Was neither of the kids that no two kids are the same unless they're twins. And even then that doesn't happen sometimes. But if you look at it, we separate kids for no other reason than to prove a point. Parents have to demand that their children are assessed, because otherwise they're going to be denied basic rights. Deaf children. We're going to go back to having deaf schools because Andrew Gary couldn't get his son in the schools. He's still allowed to get them in, although they said they would. because it won't provide science teachers. And I'm telling you, if you took a child with who has a hearing issue, and you can teachers there on sign, bet you the kids will pick up sign language quicker than anyone else, and they'll be able to communicate. Separate them, and they won't. And how do they communicate then? Their parents, how do they communicate? You look at why are you separating kids that are refugees from kids from Ireland? It's absolutely crazy, because what you're doing then is you're playing into the idea that they're different. Children are children. And it doesn't matter what colour you are, it doesn't matter what your issue is, you're a child. Work with children, don't be working with problems. And I think it's very, I learned this way back, we had the same problem with young people that were gay. They couldn't say it. They're not represented in our books. There's nothing like it. Someone has 2 fathers. Where's that in a book? Show me that. No, we're still back at the Peter and Mary books, where everyone is white and there's a mother and a father. No matter how you think about this, and it's not religion, but how you think about it, the reality is that's not life. That's not life, and it hasn't been for many, many years anyway. But if you separate them out, and then so they can be, you end up with young people because they're gay. A young person with an effeminate voice, boy in particular, will get mangled because he's an effeminate voice because he's gay. And the only reason that happens is we don't see it in classrooms. We should see the whole diversity. If you bring a Romanian child into class and he's walking into class with the kids, what do you see when you look into the classroom? You see children. And that's what the kids will see. It's when they don't see people that people really make them feel angry about and racist about people they don't see. If they're there, the kids will just play, because that's what kids do. And it doesn't enter their brain. Kids again don't have a racist gene in them. This is when they grow up, they're going to be racist. We do it. We do it all the time. How people are portrayed. And I think we need to start. We just have to include all kids. Kids that are deaf coming in here, kids with autism coming in here, kids from refugee background, kids from. They try to do it differently, right? The deaf schools is another one, because deaf schools are supposed to be in disadvantaged areas. One area, I'm counting them in disadvantaged area. It's the governments who say you're disadvantaged. Actually, if they are disadvantaged, it's also the government has made them that way. So I think, like when you're looking forward, I think leave kids be kids, leave them play together, leave them understand. It's very hard. It is hugely hard to be racist against them. If you don't know the thing, then you are. And there's so much of it out there. Like, we need to look at ourselves as a country. Do we welcome everyone with the same level of welcome? No, we don't. We should do, but we don't. And I think we need to tackle that. You teachers, parents, communities, tackle it, say it, call it out. Like we've had to call it out with young people that were gay. I mean, if you watch, right, the marriage referendum was passed and everything is great now. No, it's not. In the last number of months, there's been ferocious attacks, physical assaults on people just because they can be gay bar or because someone else is gay. Is that what we want our country to be? Well, that's what education should be about. You're asking what education. That is the most important education we're going to give a child. Is that, we all have issues. I always say to kids, you go to when they hear there's thousands of people walking around, what's the one thing they have in common? They have an issue. Do we separate over on issues, or do we see them as people? Children are children.
I've only 3 more questions from Dermot, one of our participants. He said, how can we as a society really listen to young people?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think if you go to most schools in the town, they run advocacy programs for the kids. But the teacher sits in the back of the room. No, I know one thing. If I ask the kids if I say to the children, do you want to do something in relation to something, they say yeah. And I sit at the back of the classroom. When we take them down, what does Don want? I don't want anything. So the best thing to do is adults need to remove themselves from the kids' space, then think about what they want to say. You might need a facilitator that doesn't know the kids don't, the kids don't know, because that will let the kids speak freely. When they speak freely, they come back. Now, there is a very important thing here. The Department of Education have done a number of reports over the last number of years, and they said they've heard the children's voice and they were central. None of them are. They called children together, they heard what the children said, and then they went and forgot about it. They did our piece, off we go, nothing to be done. We listened to them. But when you look at the proposal, you look what the kids said, and said, that's not what the kids said, and particularly on issues that affect themselves, whether it be education. A couple of years ago, Tusla did a children's charter and a youth charter on how they were going to be treated when they went into Tusla office. Lots of our kids were involved in that. They went and spoke at a conference. They went and spoke in Dublin to a conference. They came back down to Cork and they made banners. They showed banners with what the kids had said and how they were there. It was all there. I dare anybody to walk around any Tusla office in Ireland and find those charters. He ain't there. Why are you wasting children's time? Northern Ireland has a model on youth participation, children participation. And you cannot have children, you cannot decide that you're after making a move here and you're after doing things children want to say, well, listen, you've got to ask the children. We'll get them now and tell them what we're after doing so they agree. Proper children's participation in decision making is the same as in adults. They're there at the start. They come up, particularly then, they come up with what they think is needed. They look at how that can be moved in. They get the opportunity to tell people, in power, they hear it, and they're involved in rolling on with it. Now, what tends to happen in Ireland is, and in most Western countries is, yeah, we listen to the kids' voice, this is what they want, but this is what we're doing. And that's not listening to children, that's not involving children, that's not proper participation. There are steps to be followed. You know, don't say you're working the London model when you're actually after coming to what you already want to know, and now you want to know what the children. They're there from the start. There's a start, there's a middle, there's an end to this. And it has to be followed to give children. Why would you buy into something when people are saying it is yours?
Last question. So, how do we, one participant says, how do we encourage interconnectedness between generations?
Well, I think here's a brilliant thing for me, right? Children and children. So, Greta Thunberg started the Fridays for Futures in relation to climate action. And kids in Cork, some of the kids from here and from other places, used to told me they were going on strike. Now, as I said to them, they were on strike every 5 days, it didn't matter to me. But they asked, they were going on strike, but they were asking for my permission to go on strike. And what they used to do is, on a Friday, they would go in and they would be outside City Hall, trying to draw attention to the fact that we needed to do something on climate. And they did it through snow, wind, rain, whatever, it was on. And for me, that was number one, that was education. That's education. That's kids showing us what we need to be doing. So the kids did that. What then happened was there was a group of grandparents started coming in to visit them. And so you had this. And so what happened with the Fridays for Futures was it was children organized. I don't believe it is now, but it was children organized then, and the grandparents were having their own group. So then the grandparents and the kids decided, why not hold a joint conference inside the City Hall? So you had, an intergenerational conference led by the children and the grandparents, and they invited the president speaker. Young person, it was one of our students, stood up and welcomed the President of Ireland. But it was kids that organised that. I remember the first march that they did, going into town, closing the school, the centre, and saying, right, where I didn't tell children they had to go there, I didn't tell staff they had to go to it. And closing the centre, the kids have a protest on this climate action. It is a subject that they need to be supported. So we're closing to join in the map. And we did. And in fairness, many of the kids, many of the staff joined us. We went down outside the opera house, and I saw politicians of every hue standing in the corner, looking at the massive amount of kids were there. And I knew what was going through their mind. What was going through their mind is, how do we get them to us? And they're lost because the kids were never going to it. But they organise them, never a problem, never absolutely a problem. However, I now see, and I'm sorry, my teachers listen to this, but now when I see the marches, adults have taken over. Why? Why did adults have to take over? There was a child, they were organised, they were at the room for years. If you watch the marches around the country, you see teachers organised. Why? I think, you know, we have, okay, in the climate, it's really very good because we messed up the planet, us and generations before us. And you have the kids telling us, stop. We need to have something here for when we come through. And they're making, if you think about it, a lot of the stuff that is happening now, it's happening because of what the kids did and what the kids are saying. And I think that shows you very good avenue to do that. But I do believe that if kids are allowed, and children and teenagers are allowed to look at issues that affect their lives and to take them out there, they're the same issues that affect our lives, maybe not in the same ways, but we can join in with them. We're not separated. You know, people love to separate the generations, the grandparents on the thought. Yeah. I love to see the kids politicized, and they've done that themselves. And they're not, it's politicization without parties being involved. And it's crushing for parties to see kids are organising things. And some of these marches were bigger than some of the union marches on wages and things going back. And I just think that is magic. And it was kids. And the older, it was actually the grandparents' generation kind of got involved with them. But I think that is the way to go. I mean, there's an interesting thing. And I think in here, right, I mean, I know we've taught history and stuff like that, but we, you know, we're having a discussion of politics inside for Jason. The kids have their own ideas. And they want to teach us something we always say here and should always be true. You hear people saying that education is lifelong. I wonder how many teachers will tell you that education is lifelong, because I think the biggest learning experiences we get is by being both teachers and learners in the centre. Because the kids can know some of the stuff in line, no, but the kids teach you an awful lot. And it's understanding that, look, I love history. I read it non-stop. But I'm telling you something, you know, I'm not an expert in history. I couldn't be, there's too much of it there. So why do we, particularly in schools, and not knocking, because this is passed down, this is passed down through the training of teachers. Like, it's like, don't show weakness. If you think about, and I don't know, I remember when I was in school, and that was a long time ago, and it wasn't a high school anyway, but if a substitute teacher came in, the easiest way to get rid of the substitute teacher and to get the substitute teacher to stay away from you was to ask a question that you know they wouldn't know the answer to. Because invariably they'd come along and tell you, get out, get back to work, cause havoc. And I always say to the staff here, I say it all the time, and I have to do it myself. I don't know everything about history. So if a kid comes along and asks me a question, right, and they could be aware is it they're taking the mick here, and they might be, but there's one way of dissolving all that is saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to it, but I'll get it for you, and I'll come back to you tomorrow. What's wrong with saying that? How many times in your school years have you heard a teacher saying, I don't know the answer to that? And yes, there has to be things you don't know. But I think if we're open and honest about it, and if we realise that children can teach us, you know, I think Paul Freire, his belief in the pedagogy of the oppressed would be that education is about the community. It's about where everyone is the community, and everyone's story is valuable. Everyone's, from the child to the adult, because things change. Everyone, and if you give everybody the opportunity to realise their importance in education, then they're much more likely to take part. Telling kids that they have something to offer to you as an adult is amazing, because then the young person, what's just been said, why can't we have debates in classrooms? Why does it have to be read a book, read a book, read a book? Waste of time. Poetry. And as you sit down and you look at poetry and you start understanding what poetry is about, you'll never love poetry. The number of young people that you would meet in any city, anywhere in the world, that don't go to art galleries or don't go to theatres, because they don't feel that's part of their culture. It is. It's part of everybody's culture. But if you're feeling that, what has led you to believe that? And I think sometimes parents, communities even say, that's not for us. Well, if it's not for you, that's grand, but don't say us. Everybody should be entitled to go there. And I think one of the great things for me is how we bring kids up to GCC and stuff like that. You'll get them involved in things up there. The kids will tell you, they never saw themselves walking through those gates. They feel straight. You hear adults saying that. So why would it be any different for kids? I mean, it's about saying that, acknowledging that there are times we're vulnerable and we don't know the answer to everything, and that we have something to learn from the kids. Yeah, and kids have something to learn from us.
That's a great place to finish. Thanks really, Dan, for taking the time, and I'm sure the participants have already found your passion for young people clear from the what you said, and lots of key things to take away there was that the biggest thing is giving a voice to young people and giving them autonomy and agency. I think that answers a lot of the questions tonight that participants asked. And thanks a million again, and we'll
no problem. And if there's anybody listening and they want to meet over for kids, we can volunteer.
Thanks a million. Talk to you soon.